Today I'm going to talk about XM Cloud content migration and the challenges I faced in the recent project I experienced. So I'm not going to share you everything and all the aspects of it, but I want to share at least the most important, which was my approach to it. My name is Martin Miles. I'm also Sitecore MVP. This year is my 8th annual Sitecore MVP award. I do love writing blogs. Over the last year, I wrote 60 blog posts, which is pretty a lot. And I love to present on conferences and organize user groups like the one you are now watching. These are my social contacts. I would like to emphasize Sitecore Telegram, probably the best way to receive Sitecore news, everything in a very unobtrusive way. So you go to a channel, for example, for XM Cloud, and you see all the recent changes and all the most important news you have. It was a very unmodest self-promotion. With that in mind, let's go to the content migration. Let's think about the actual problem. So let's say your client wants to get a shiny modern XM Cloud, and they also provide you with a legacy database. Let's say this is a database from legacy XP, and in my case, that was something like 9.3, so pretty legacy. There could be some potential way of doing this if you want to play locally. The first would be restoring the backup of XM Cloud database to a legacy XP of the desired version with the content database, but that is not something that's going to happen because in my case, that was 9.3, and it's absolutely incompatible with XM Cloud schema, nor it's capable to handle modern items such as items as resources, something that was invented in XP 10.1. So therefore, this option is totally not possible. So we can go other way around. We can probably use the old database from 9.3 and try to plug it to XM Cloud. But when it comes to SaaS solution, it's not that much possible. Let's think why. First of all, this historical approach also does not apply because we don't have access to the cloud databases. Just that. We can only do something locally, not in the clouds. There's no backup tool, there's no restore tool, there's no UI. Between the lines, I know that there were some cases where Sitecore support managed to get the backup of the cloud database from XM Cloud and provide it to customers in case of some emergency. But this is something done on demand, manually, and you should not expect things like that happen. You should only rely on yourself. As I said, databases are not compatible. XM Cloud database has its own schema. It was branched from, as far as I remember, 10.3, the XM. They have their own changes. There's also no technical documentation about Sitecore upgrade, or at least I was not able to find that. And the cherry on a cake, there is a Docker, which is the only way you can do XM Cloud locally. And as I said, you cannot do it in the cloud, you can only do it locally. Your database basically run in Docker. That brings plenty of challenges. So how would you approach that? I'll talk about that later, but let's speak about migration scenarios. When you do migration of your content to XM Cloud, when it comes to the migration itself, there are two potential ways. So first of all, you may face MVC to headless conversion. And this topic is a very separate presentation. I will not cover that. I will talk about what I faced. In my case, the legacy Sitecore instance was pretty old. The client decided to do full redesign. So when redesign is happening, we get a new UI. When new UI happens, there are new renderings. They have their own IDs. You will not have the legacy IDs of the renderings. In that case, I only can do migration of the data sources, and of course globals, and make this content consumable by the new renderings. That would be my goal and objective for this exercise. And also, since the rendering and components are pretty new, I must end up with the mapping document for components. Let's say the legacy component, which used this type of data source, maps to the new component, which has been done with all these component details like ID, path, etc. This consumes this data source. So something like contract with myself to know that everything is supported. Another benefit of this particular redesign approach was that I can also benefit from all the headless SXA features that are fully available with XM Cloud. And it's not just page and partial designs, which are powerful, but in my case, page branches were even more powerful because there was a chance to reconstruct the pages with everything needed. I cannot emphasize how powerful is that. Going ahead, we must do assessment of a migration. Measure it all. If you cannot measure it, then you don't own it. Simply as that. I would advise you to create a content matrix to assess what are you going to migrate and understand the complexity and measure, of course. The best way to do that would be using PowerShell script, and I'm kindly providing the script here. You see the URL to my GitHub gist, which will do an assessment of a legacy system, create you lots of spreadsheets and reports. What I've done from there is I decided to create a three-dimensional report. Basically, this is the matrix you see on the screen. And I decided to go in a creative way. I call it three-dimensional. So you see the rows represent all the pages that are involved in the content migration. The columns, line 1, basically starting from the column C, are all the possible components that we encounter on the system. In my case, that was an instance having 8 websites. They're all different. There was lots of reusable content. These components were shared. All these required information for those pages like templates, locations, IDs, etc. you can find there. What is most important, the intersection of the rows and columns represent the components used on these pages. This is especially helpful as they can vary per same template. Let's say you have variable number of rich text on a template that is, let's say, generic page. But what is more important, you see the intersection is a number, a digit. And this digit is basically multi-row cell. I highlighted in red frame on top. So the first line is always the number of the components of this particular component. I mean, number of occurrences of this particular component on this particular page. And below you list all these components. So in my case, there are 2 components here, and there are IDs of these components. So I know like pretty everything about my instance with that. And I also introduced color coding. Green means that the number of components match the found GUIDs. And you see there is one red cell. Red cell means that there are some unreferenced components or some broken components or something that does not match. In this particular case, there were only 11 components, but 13 components referenced. So definitely this is an indicator for us to point attention on this page that there are broken references. I also highlight yellow cells. These are structural components. I know that there is something really big and impressive coming in terms of layout. For Sitecore, we will have universal component for doing these things. I cannot say much at this stage, but I'm very anticipating until it happens. But as for now, we still have to create these structural components. For example, I have split container 70-30. I mark it as yellow, and you see a number of occurrences on the page, not to mess with the actual content pages. This is pretty intuitive color coding. It shows me if component has data sources or if it's structural, if it has broken link, everything I want to do. In this particular scenario, there are, as I remember, 8,000 pages and something about 40 components or maybe 70 components, can't say for sure. So this is a pretty huge matrix. So how do I get this matrix? I used AI. The answer is pretty simple. It would be no surprise.
Martin, I have a question. So when you're doing this analysis, like how much time do you spend on this analysis? Because this is in itself is like a huge task,
You
right?
will not believe me. It's only 3 hours.
Really?
8,000 rows, 40 to 70 components. I spent only 3 hours. So the way I ended up with this spreadsheet was I used the PowerShell reports. This is the report I provided the URL for here. And from that report, I used AI. It took me like 70% of the time it took me to generate the adequate prompt to make
that's how it is.
what I wanted, because this also, like, I have fixed, the columns are fixed, the rows, like row 1 is fixed, column A are fixed, like lots of other small improvements I wanted to see in this document is there. You see, there is the column N. There are like, in the top left corner, there are triangle. That's also something very important. I don't remember what was that. I already forgot, but this is another useful indicator which I wanted to point my attention. I need to refer to documentation. What is that? With that in mind, just having this document and using PowerShell scripts will save you a lot of planning. Believe me, it saved me a lot of planning. Let's now go to the tools and look in right-hand side. You already guess which tools I keep in mind. So number one, XM to XM Cloud Content Migration Tool. The first time I saw this tool was MVP Summit a year ago. A few months later, this tool went live. I had a conversation with Author. This tool is a WPF application, so it's standalone Windows application. The way it works is it looks similar to SIA. As you see on a screenshot, you select what you want to migrate, just content or users as well. You can choose between migrating your on-premise or PS installation into XM Cloud. It will later prompt you XM Cloud credentials, do all these tricks. What is interesting, if you check up users here, it will go and create the users in the cloud portal. So these users will receive the emails. It integrates old with new, and it's kind of nice bridge. However, this does not do convert renderings. So you don't expect this tool to work something like Kazoo does. The migration tool, XM to XM Cloud, it starts only with version 10.1. I believe because items resources were introduced in 10.1, somehow leverages this feature. This is the limitation. There was a promise to expand support to version 10 and to version 9.3. I'm not sure if it is there yet, but as of December last year, that was no there. The other tool is our well-known friend. It's called Sidecore Razzle. This one requires own license. You cannot do trial, you cannot see and poke this tool unless you are Sidecore MVP. If you're Sidecore MVP, request your license from MVP program, and then you will be able to set up Razzle. So Razzle will allow you to do multiple connections, and as you see on a screenshot, it will allow you to compare the databases and migrate it. In some way, it is similar to TDS and has the same experience. Basically, it was done by the same company. No wonder it is. And there are some challenges of setting up Razzle, and one of them is that you still have to maintain two instances, the legacy XP and OXM and XM Cloud. Are there any better solution? In my case, everything happened in the atmosphere of secrecy, and I didn't have legacy system. I only had a database. That toolset was not an option to me at all. So what should I do? My approach was to find a way how to connect legacy databases to a local XM Cloud instance right inside of Docker. The question is why? Why would I do that? The key idea of this initial approach was residing both legacy and the new content within the same instance. You don't have to run multiple XP and XM. You don't have to bloat your ports or use multiple machines. You don't need to bother with connectivity like you should do with Razzle. You basically have your XM Cloud instance and have multiple database. So if you remember the concept of publishing target in Sidecore, right at the top bottom of your content editor desktop, there is a database selector. So you see master, core databases. Sometimes you may have extra databases. So my idea was to get this legacy database registered within XM Cloud and be selectable. But I will explain why further ahead. Another reason why it should make sense for me, especially in my local development machine, is because of the database sizes. They are huge, and running multiple databases and multiple instances is not a good option. I wanted to make as compact as possible. Here's the exercise. I will now tell you how to connect a legacy database to XM Cloud instance in Docker. You can do that with as many databases as you want, but you need to follow specific rules. As you see on the right-hand side, the selected database is called Sidecore RR. For abstract reasons, I would call this project RR. This RR notation I will be using for further naming convention here. Number one, you should get exposed SQL Server portals outside of Docker. And if you open Docker Compose of XM Cloud, at least that happens with Foundation Head Starter Kit, you will see something like ports 14,330 equals 1,043. It already is coming out of the box, this port mapping. So they expose SQL Server port 1433 outside as a port 14330. That already allows me connecting with SQL Management Studio. Now, it's important to keep version in mind. Your Management Studio should be one of the recent version. I personally use the version 19.3, equivalent of SQL Server 16, which is in fact SQL Server 2022. The other thing is you may be given the database as a data tier backup rather than binary backup. You will need to convert that, and you need to convert that to the specific version of your SQL Server. Then you will be able to follow this exercise. Anyway, since we have the port mapped, let's spin up our local XM Cloud containers. As usually we do it by app ps1, keep waiting until XM Cloud loads. The next step, after you connect, you need to enable contain database authentication. Otherwise, you will not be able to restore the database. Here are 4 lines of the commands. You may see you need to do 2 execs followed by go. This command may be familiar from XP days. Once you get your new database in SQL Server Management Studio, once you get this configured, you restore the database. And once you get it in SQL Server Management Studio, you need to rename it to something like sitecore.r. I make it bold in a right-hand side bottom corner. This is following our naming convention. Sitecore.your name. In my case, it's $R. This will be needed to plug the database to the system, and I will show you with the next steps how to. This is naming convention. It's hidden from our eyes within a logic within XM Cloud CM container. I found a way how to do that, but there's no documentation. Believe me and follow these steps, you get it working. I apologize for a bit clumsy presentation of the code here, but there are 2 things you need to do at step 3. And this is where the whole magic happens. First of all, you go to Docker Compose override for your CM container. And what you do is you create your database and provide it with a prefix in this format. And the same you do with connection string file. You also add name in the same format and you provide the database name. And if you compare this on the right-hand side, if you compare both bolded names, here the initial catalog equals prefix name.rr, and at the bottom it's in connection string, it's sitecore_rr. Don't try to find the logic here. These are internals of containers. This is just works. Make sure to follow this magic pattern. The important step is once you do that, you need to restart CM container. And just restarting it from Docker Desktop or Visual Studio Code is not sufficient. What you must do, you must remove it and recreate. So here are the commands for you to do that. Okay, let's go ahead. Here you go to CM container. What you want to do, you need to validate if previous changes were successful. This file C inetpub blah, 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 connection string. This is your connection string within CM container. And if you open it within container and see the content, you will see your new connection string or strings if you added multiple databases. Because I added 2, I also added legacy core in my own example. The other most important thing is you go and check environmental variables there in CM container as well. So you will see something like, I quote below, env, and that should be this environmental variable. Once again, I bolded the most important naming conventions here. If you get there, you are almost done. So now you need to register your database with XM Cloud. How you do that? You create a config patch file. You will supply these customizations. So you see I'm creating it right in the deploy folder. But of course, you may want to add this to the project permanently. This is the content of this config patch file. It looks scary. I positioned it in 2 rows. Please don't get scary. I am sharing the blog post. With the blog post, I will provide all the code and all the necessary things. But pay attention, I also bolded here this naming convention. So similar like to built-in databases, you need to provide event queue provider. You need to actually register database for the property store provider, set caches, and all the bits as you normally do. The moment of truth, you can connect to the legacy database and take a look at the very right bottom corner. I framed it with red. So you see the database is RR. I switched from master to RR database. I see the legacy content. Here is it. And there is RR website as well. If you see in the URL bar, this is XM Cloud. This is local XM Cloud running for me locally. At this stage, I have registered external database from XP within my XM Cloud local container instance. What benefits does it give me? Number one, I can now copy content using a built-in tool. If you go to control panel in your sidecar, you will see this database tool, which is called move an item to another database. When you click this tool, you see the dialog box right-hand side. It will take the current database. I remember you, it's RRH currently. So you see RR database. From the RR database, it shows me the drop-down where I want to copy it. Let's say it would be master. From RR database, I will copy to master, and this dialog will point me to further stages if I want to copy it like an item by its own, or maybe I want to use the children. Long story short, this tool is pretty powerful because it does exactly what it does. It copies the items. All the items are available for you to copy. All the items you can copy to your new XM Cloud. More to say, it allows you to copy all versions. It allows you to copy media items as well. So media also works. Process blob. It also supports error handling. The biggest thing that you don't need any extra tooling to use this database. As soon as you register legacy database, you can copy it straight away. I wouldn't be myself without promoting PowerShell. I don't know any person who loves PowerShell more than I do. That is for a reason. Now let's enable Sidecar PowerShell extension. Again, I do it in the deploy folder, but later you can copy it into the register it with the project, so it will be stay permanently with you. You create something like zzz/z/spe config so that it gets processed the latest with the following content that basically enables PowerShell on your local. For the cloud, you need to assign environmental variable to allow and do redeploy, so that also enables PowerShell there. With that in mind, you will be able to run both console and ISE, and you can actually start scripting. This is the screenshot of me going to console. I go to master database, did list, and here's my content. But that is not everything. I think the most power from PowerShell comes with PowerShell remoting. And the beauty of XM Cloud is that you can leverage PowerShell remoting. What I'm doing, I'm creating the PowerShell remoting sample script. Right-hand side, there is a script. It accepts two parameters, the environment name and item path. By default, it's local, and it returns me the value of home item. What the script does, it treats the config, and from the config, it takes the values for the environment. So on the right-hand side, I showed you what the config is. So for my local database, this is the host name, this is context username, and this is remote and secret. Very simple. Provide environment, which is local, the item. The script treats config, leverages PowerShell remoting, and executes the code. So you will see it on the line 25 that starts with get item within the script block. So this line is what gets executed in a context of your remote instance, whichever you provide with the config. So far, so good, but now we need to enable a couple of things for all this beauty to work. On the right-hand side, you saw a username, which is SPE remote. This is the user with the context that script will run. So we need to create this user. Nothing special. You go to user manager, create this SPE remote user, or whichever name you give to this user. Make sure it is administrator so that you get full context of operation. You're good to go. The other thing, make sure it's not locked. In my case, it's on the right-hand side, locked column is empty. So I'm good to go. Of course, we have secret. So scrolling back, you see for the local, you have remote and secret. For the dev, you have remote and secret. So this is secret kept locally. You do not check in this file into source control, obviously, but it should match something on a cloud. Go to deploy app tool, create this SP remote and secret environmental variable, and provide this same value. The magic will work. Last but not least, PowerShell remoting requires a module that runs on your host machine. Typically, you need to copy it under Windows program files PowerShell folder. So this is incorrect. I was doing my presentation in a rush, so please ignore the second bullet point. This is incorrect path. You should go into Windows PowerShell/modules folder. There you will see SPE folder, or create it and extract the content. So where do you get this module? You get it from the official SPE project GitHub. They have releases page, and from that releases page, they provide this module for every single version. Now you can run the script, which we created previously, get item field script, left-hand side. We run it with env variable, passing it local, and everything if everything was done successfully, you will see the fields for the home item right in the window of your PowerShell running on your local computer, not within XMCloud. Congratulations. At this stage, you will be able to move the files into the cloud to multiple environments, including your local. You can manipulate the file, you can script everything, you can do lots of things, and you can control it all from your host machine. The one thing I want to notify you is please do not forget to disable this remoting when you are going live, because remoting may be treated as quite a vector of attack. You can do it simply by deleting SP user, or by removing these configurations, or by doing both. Okay, so at this stage, we now set up the database locally, and we set up connection to the cloud environments. We have PowerShell extension, PowerShell remoting, and we can do different manipulation. So we can command the content from legacy database in the local XM cloud, and from local XM cloud, we can move it to cloud and do whatever we want. Let's talk about migration tactics. So you need to define migration approach. How are you going to move all your data to the cloud? There is no any instruction I found. Things I heard from Sidecore was you basically do content from your local to the cloud by the means of serialization, which looks a little bit insane for the huge databases, especially media reach. What my team decided to do instead was basically leveraging Sidecore PowerShell remoting, making the packages programmatically. Let's say I have a very huge database. The PowerShell script iterates some parts of this database and creates packages in batch. And then in batch, it uploads it to the remote destination, executes this package installation. At the end of the script, the cloud environment will have the same set of content and items as the source environment. I definitely do not recommend following serialization approach, because you should not serialize your content, and that's it. But when we talk about serialization, you still have the definition items, and with your legacy code, you may get it as unicorn or as TDS. So when it comes to unicorn, it's relatively easy to convert it to Sidecore CLI, because Sidecore CLI is what is officially supported by XMCloud. When it comes to TDS, I do not know the right solution. Maybe there is something in the community sphere, you have to Google. In my case, we did redesign. Our team created serialization as it required from scratch. And more to say, we did not have access to the legacy code base. So we have to create it on our own. Another thing that you may keep in mind while copying the content is whether you want to preserve the IDs. In addition to that, if you want to copy all the versions, or if you want to copy only the latest version. Preserving IDs may be really helpful when you will later test the migration. It also helps to keep your consistency. And the good news is that the built-in tool that comes from Sidecore control panel preserves the IDs while copying the content. And it also copies all the items. So you are good to go from the both aspects. When you do things with PowerShell, there is an API how you can create an item with providing its ID. So by leveraging this API, you will be able to move your items in bulk, but keeping the same ID. And I'm going to share the script, how to do that, sample scripts, in my blog post about the content migration. Last but not least, you need to think about how the content freeze would take place. How would you apply deltas? You need to assess all the things after you go live, and you should have at least strategy for dealing with both. Okay, we have all the good media library. The one advice for media library is please do the revision. Do clean up results from that revision, even before extracting the legacy database if you can. Because I never seen any media library that was not a mess. I'm doing Sidecore for more than a decade, and all the time media library appeared to be a mess. There should be some sort of housekeeping. Ideally, that housekeeping should be done by the client and by their team if they have this luxury. If not, you may facilitate this for them, suggesting to potentially run assessment scripts with PowerShell and say which media is not used, what you can clean up, maybe to get rid of the most heavy media items. But you need to do this revision even before you take the backup. The other thing is be aware of experience edge limitations. Currently, you can only publish 50 megabytes to media item or file to experience edge. If you have items of bigger size, consider removing them or using alternative DIMs or solutions. The other thing I want to say is you should migrate only reference items, and this is very sensitive and negotiable point. In some cases, editors may have unreferenced items that are sitting there for some purpose. Maybe they keep it for later, maybe they are taken away or unpublished. You need to talk with them. So if this approach is okay, you definitely want to migrate only items that are referenced. There are some other things to consider. One, redirect. Make sure you assess all the redirects that client has. It's not just something that come in with old good redirect module for Sitecore XP, which we'll know. Sometimes redirects could be external. People often use infrastructure to do like mass URL rewrites, or let's say decommission site or move site or do some changes. And that's how they deal with these redirects by their infrastructure rather than within Sitecore. You need to assess both of them. When it comes to XM Cloud, we have redirect items and redirect maps provided by Headless SXA that allow you powerful options for doing redirects. There is official documentation. I reference it here. Know your platform capabilities. You may also face some items on your content tree that refer to modules or some specific customizations. Heads up, many of the modules will not survive, if not all of them. Lots of modules utilize old XP pipelines and they simply will not go. When it comes to stuff from the core database, like commands and these buttons, all that stuff is doable with XM Cloud. But if the button relies to the command and command relies to some functionality based by the unsupported pipelines, that's not something you're going to have. Get rid of that. And of course, talk to the client, suggest alternatives. Once again, attach referenced items. You might end up with a PowerShell report, and I've done the one for my client saying that, look, here's lots of unreferenced items you have. Probably now maybe you want to do housekeeping for them. And with PowerShell extension, they do have these reports out of the box. It creates nicely looking spreadsheet. You can download this Excel file or in CSV, give it to customer and say, here are all the assets you need to work out. Now, security. You definitely can, and in many cases should copy security. And when I say security, it's roles, not users, but roles. The reason is that if you want to keep them, roles are set in the items, page items linked at the security field. If you need to keep them, if you want to keep them, copy your roles. And this tool, which I mentioned in the beginning, it does that automatically if you select the checkbox. Also, you may come across Sitecore forms. We now have composable forms with XM Cloud. Well, however, it has some drawbacks. I would not call them drawbacks. Much more honest would be to say it's not yet in that stage. It's still under development. In the recent month or two, I saw lots of improvements to Sitecore forms. They now start supporting the file uploads, quite big in my opinion. Previously, forms were scoped only for specific environment, and there was no way how you can share the form between different environments of the same project. Now, this limitation has gone. But from what I know, as of today, there is no way to serialize form and deserialize form. If you create form, okay, what you will do? Even if you have a form on a legacy, you can reproduce the same form with XM Cloud forms, right? But you will not be able to migrate the gathered, collected content from the forms. Historically, this content was populated in this specific forms database, but with the composable forms of XM Cloud, there is no user interface to see the forms, and there's no persistent storage for the forms. This is something you need to provide through the webhook once the form is submitted. You need to tell where this gathered information goes to. Probably that would be your CDP, or it may be your CRM, but you must provide the storage for that data. If you need to keep this data, you need to care manually about migrating the forms. And of course, once you complete your migration, you need to validate if everything has been done okay or not okay. The first thing to do would be sitemap comparison. You obviously have sitemap for your legacy Sitecore instance. You may have multiple sitemaps for different websites. Your new XM Cloud website should have the same URLs, because once you switch the DNS, imagine the pages were bookmarked they will get lost. For any mismatch of a sitemap, you must create a redirect. If something has moved, you must create redirect. If you move the whole section, you must create redirect map, unless you explicitly talk it through with your client who tells that we don't need to maintain redirects, we don't need to maintain this functionality. So this is number one. Number two, sitemap will tell you missing URLs. So if some URL is missing from your new XM Cloud powered website, okay, this is a red flag. You must go and check why this page is missing. Hasn't it been published? Are there any problems? Does it exist at all? That's something for you to check. Beyond sitemap, you may want to create automated test scripts for doing deep compare. And by saying that, I mean, you can compare specific elements on specific pages, on specific templates, footer, header, count of images, like whatever you do. Historically, people used Selenium for automated migration, but now, since we're going into the headless world, there is a better tool. It's called Cypress. I managed to integrate this one with XM Cloud rendering host, and I'm using it often, so please refer to my blogs to see how you can benefit from this one. Last but not least, manual testing should always present. No automation will do whatever your quality assurance team can. Finally, these are the reference for the tools, Razzle migration tool, redirects, and that was it from my side. If you got any questions, go ahead.
There's a lot of, I would say, research done for content migration. Like, is there a way to like condense it, like making a tool of its own for migration, like a separate community driven tool for migration?
I was thinking about that. Historically, I've done a tool called Siphon. That
Yeah.
was doing database migrations, restores, and all the bits.
Yeah.
I made something called Siphon Cloud. I never published it. Siphon Cloud is a very early prototype to work with XM Cloud for similar things and for doing most frequent operations with this platform. I didn't give it a go because it's not yet mature, and we're all busy people. We all do deliveries, and sometimes we work more than 8 hours per day, and sometimes even more than that. So I simply was overwhelmed over the last year. And remember, I said I wrote lots of blogs. This also consumes time. I hope to come back to this tool, and the way I see that, I will create a similar plugin model like I've done for Siphon, so that you will be able to use the tool along with your PowerShell scripts, where script is effectively a plugin, so that you get all the power of user interface and same like environmental settings, secrets, everything you need to connect to your XM Cloud, while your script, your plugin, is only care of business logic. So you take a script stub with all the parameters passed into, and you basically within this stub, you access everything from Siphon Cloud and just do your business. Maybe I will write these migration things myself.
Yeah. So
I think
I
that
wanted
would be the best way to do, because you will not be able to cover all the migration scenarios.
right. I wanted to add that a lot of clients are coming to us like they're moving from Braco to Sitecore or content, some headless to Sitecore. I was thinking there could be like a generic intermediate step of some kind of JSON that can be built, and then things can be moved to Sitecore Cloud. So it's
Yes,
like universal.
I have answer for you.
Sure, go ahead.
So sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
The one thing I didn't mention in this presentation is authoring management API. So
Oh
this
yeah.
is GraphQL API, which you can use for importing the data. And we actually used to do that as well. For our XM Cloud instance, we had some content that must be user editable. So authors must edit it. And this is a content that comes from external system. This is very frequently updated, like on a daily basis. So we export the content by the nighttime, we merge it and enhance it with what the editors have been created. So to make this functionality happen, we use author and API.
Thanks.
So you don't have to use PowerShell as
Yep.
a solo tool.
Got it.
Have you used the Cypress tool, Martin, or has anyone here used the Cypress tool?
No, I only saw it in action when the author presented it at MVP Summit last year. There were a couple reports of people using Ruzzle. I know at least 2 reported for migration to XM Cloud. And you see my approach.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. This might be fixed, but just a heads up in case this is still a thing. The tool would error out if you had 2 siblings with the same name in the tree.
Yeah.
That was one thing. Katil, you're
I
aware of that
remember
one?
that. Yeah.
Okay. Any others that you know of?
Not right now, but there are certainly some other gotchas too.
Yeah. What about serializing content and then deserializing it? Katil, you're talking about it's almost like let's almost like
Universal.
store that content in JSON and then pull that in, right? What if we use YAML for that instead of JSON?
Yeah.
That's what packaging does. It's still serialization.
Yeah. It's if we have to build it like a universal importer into Sitecore, like it could be JSON or YAML, because we need to extract from some source, convert it into YAML or JSON, then the authoring API can push it.
That's very cool. That's it's actually pretty clever. Does that tool the content tool from the control panel, Martin? Does that disable item events when it moves content? Do you know?
I think so. I think it does.
That's good.
Historically, this tool has been with us for ages.
Yeah.
And the people who know this tool know it for a reason. These are people who sometimes messed web database. Or sorry, master database. Sometimes people delete important bits from the master database. And they start panicking. What we're gonna do? We don't have backups. How do we do that? Where do we get the latest version? We have package, but it's maybe a week ago. And then they realize this item has been published to web. So they can take at least the latest version of it. They will lose version history, yes, if they move to master, but at least they will get the latest published version to keep consistency. So how do they do that? They try to go packaging it, but package doesn't work. So they start thinking, and eventually they Google out this tool. They go to web database and transfer content to master.
There you go. Now everyone also got a tip of how to recover content. Awesome. Any other questions from anyone? That's very detailed, and thank you. This is actually a really good guide for everyone. I'm gonna post this video as soon as possible out there for everyone to use. Any last thoughts from your end, Martin?
There will be my blog, and I will try to post everything I told today in more details. That's where you'll find all the scripts, so you don't need to grab them from a screen, obviously. Everyone who is following my approach, you're welcome to approach me. I will give you some hints. For example, I myself, when I was testing PowerShell remoting, I found that there were some issues with PowerShell module. What happened was Sitecore XM Cloud team, they take away some indexes. So when they were removing web database, they removed some indexes. And I can't say what was that exactly, but because of that, one of the functions and as dependency for XM Cloud uploading files dropped. So I reported that to PowerShell team. And hopefully with the next version, they will do the revision and they will fix all the things.
Awesome. All right, Martin. Well, thanks so much. This has been a great presentation. As always, man, your presentations are just pretty much guides, detailed, and
Blessed to hear.
Yeah, it's just ready for everyone to follow. So it's very cool. Thank you. All right, well, so this wraps up our Sitecore user group. Let's see, so we have a Sitecore symposium coming up mid-October. So the entire Sitecore, the entire week of mid-October is going to be the Sitecore week. So we have the Sitecore MVP Summit. By the way, who's from the current group, folks who are still on, who's going to the Sitecore symposium?
On the MVP Summit.
Or the MVP Summit, yeah.
Yeah.
Julia,
Yes,
going?
me.
Amir? Craig, nice. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll see each other at the event then. I'll be there from Sunday to Friday. Otherwise, we'll schedule another one in just a couple months post symposium. So I'm sure there will be a lot of things to talk about. All right, everyone. Thanks for your time. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.